Hello and welcome back to What's Millie Making, where I am Millie and I talk about the past, present, and future of my knitting. Today's video is all about my spring knitting plans with yarn from Stash. Before I get into the plans themselves, I'm going to talk a little bit about how I formed them. If you'd rather just get to the plans part, I'll put in a timestamp for what you can fast forward to. There's not a lot of talk. There's some talk about the difference between project knitters and process knitters, and I think to be a happy knitter, I need to fulfill both. So I need to enjoy the process of whatever I'm making, and I also want to make things that I actually want to use and wear and enjoy. So if I don't like making it, I don't want to make it, and if I'm not going to use a final object, I don't want to make that either. Let's put that to the side for now. So if I'm knitting seasonally, obviously I have to take the weather into account. I live in the Northeast United States where we do experience all 4 seasons. So spring is basically goodbye winter, hello summer. Very temperate weather. And I checked the average temperatures of March, April, and May, the average highs, I should say. And in March it's around 50, April 63, and May 70. So that's a pretty wide range of temperatures. If it's 50 outside, I'm probably going to be wearing a winter coat still. But if it's 70, I probably don't even need maybe if there's a breeze, I'll need a cardigan, but the arms and legs are out at that point. So that's a pretty wide how many times am I saying it's a wide temperature range? That means I can wear a lot of different clothes, which means I can make a lot of different clothes. Back to the project / process knitter thing. I do not enjoy knitting with plant fibers. I've tried to make it work, and even the ones that I like the most, I don't enjoy as much as wool. And as far as tees and tanks, if it's warm enough for me to wear a tee or a tank, it's probably also warm enough for me to wear a sundress or just a store-bought t-shirt or top. And I'm honestly going to be reaching for those more than the few knit tees and tanks I've made. Ergo, I don't enjoy making them and I don't wear them a lot. So despite seeing so many cute tee and tank patterns in other people's spring knitting plans, I just didn't think it made sense for me to include them in mine for the reasons I just explained. Now that I have talked about what I don't want to make, what do I want to make? So I took a look at my stash, I took a look at my Ravelry queue, and came to the pretty obvious conclusion. I like knitting sweaters, I like wearing sweaters, so for spring I'm just going to continue knitting sweaters. Some of the sweaters are on the lighter side. There's one mohair knit, one knit that I'm making with mohair and unspun, but generally those are fibers that I reserve for the winter. Large part of that is winter and fall, because my hands get sweaty easily with those fibers, and sweaty hands and knitting, not a good combination. Oh, one other thing I also took into consideration, next month is the New Jersey Wool Walk, so then I looked back into my yarn spreadsheet to see what I bought last year. I'd really love to knit some of it up, and if I finish something, then I can wear it to the Wool Walk. I also don't really do the whole seasonal color palette or inspiration board, because I'm very much wear what I want when I want kind of gal. But when I was pulling the yarns, I kind of realized I do have a sort of color palette going on. There's some pastels, and then they're anchored by a cream and a chocolatey brown as neutral colors. Without further ado, let us get into the patterns. I have organized them from what I plan on making towards the beginning of spring all the way to towards the end of spring. So the patterns I'm going to talk about first are the ones I would like to get done first, as I would like to probably wear them more when it's a little bit cooler. And then the projects I'm going to talk about towards the end of the video are the ones that I plan on making into May and June when it's a little bit warmer. Also, similar to what I said in my Make 9 videos, this video is just for the vibes. Just to have a framework. I really don't have any expectations of finishing all these projects, and if I don't cast them all on either, that's totally fine by me. Just kind of like to have this so when I want to cast something on, I'm not tempted to run to the yarn store or shop online for yarn. I can say, okay, I have this yarn, I have these plans, let's do that instead. So the first pattern in my spring knitting plans is the Esther Sweater by Petite. I think it's her newest release. And I know the Esther jacket was part of the Isager archives. I'm not sure if the sweater is as well. Basically the Isager archives collection, I think it's still an ongoing collection where they have designers remaking some of the vintage Isager patterns for like a more modern palette. And this is a drop shoulder sweater with a repeating pattern all throughout the sweater, like on the sleeves, on the body, and there's no cabling, there's no lace. It's pretty much I think it's like a moss stitch, and then the rest of the patterning is also just done with knits and pearls. For the yarn, I talked a little bit about the yarn combo in my last knitting podcast. So I want to knit it with this Nutiden, which is an unspun yarn in the colorway Stika, held with a single strand of silk mohair from Aimee in the colorway Aimee's Shawl. First of all, I feel like this colorway is just so spring. As soon as I first saw this Nutiden colorway, which is from their February collection, I immediately thought creamsicle, and I feel like this Aimee colorway, even though when it's wound up it looks more pink, it also does have a lot of like creamsicle orangey colors in there too. This silk mohair is on the thinner side. It has a lot of fuzz to it, but the yardage is higher. It has 550 yards for every 50 grams. And I think actually the combination of this thinner silk mohair and the Nutiden will make for a very light and airy sweater, and also the final object will be a lot lighter. I think in Petite Knit's like recommended yarns, for my size, the final sweater would be around 650 grams, and with my combination of yarns, I think it'll be closer to the 400 gram weight. Yeah, around 400 grams, because 300 grams of this and 100 grams of that. The second sweater I would like to knit as part of my spring knitting plans is the Hana Sweater by Junko Okamoto, and this is one of the sweaters from my Make 9. It's a really interesting cabled sweater, and the way that it's made is kind of like patchwork. You don't knit top down, bottom up, side to side. You start off with a square and you pick up stitches for each section that you make, I'm pretty sure, and all of them have different types of cables going in different directions, and I think it just makes for a very interesting garment, and I don't really have to worry about getting bored when making this. Downside is that it will require a pretty significant portion of my attention. As far as the yarn goes for this sweater, I want to use yarn that I bought during last year's wool walk. This is Brooklyn Tweed Shelter in the colorway Fossil. This is an American Targhee, Targhee Columbia wool, worsted weight. Similar to the yarn choice for my previous sweater, this is also a relatively light yarn. Each skein is 50 grams and 140 yards. That means for each 100 grams, you have 280 yards of yarn, which is a lot of yardage for a worsted weight yarn. I feel like most of them are closer to like the 150, 200 yards per 100 grams. And I was looking on the Brooklyn Tweed website, and I think the way they get this yarn to be so light is that they spin it in a unique way. They say they use both worsted and woolen spun methodology. I don't really know how it works, but I'm here for the results. And I really like this colorway because even though it is a cream, there's like little specks of brown throughout it. I don't know if you can really see it on the camera, but that is that. Next sweater on my spring knitting plans is a cardigan. I don't really love cardigans because who loves to purl that much? Not me. The cardigan that I want to make is a Calm Down cardigan by Lily Kate France. It's a really timeless design. It's a saddle shoulder construction, but then there's some ribbing details, I think, like along the shoulder and along the arm line. It has a v-neck that it's not too shallow, it's not too deep. I think it'll look good when worn open or closed. I also really like that it has a double knit button band. Even though they're a massive pain to knit, I think they end up providing a sturdier fabric, and I guess it just looks a little bit more polished. My whole thing is I don't like when you put buttons and then the fabric kind of sags. That bothers me. But because the double knit button band is thicker, I don't run into that issue. The yarn I want to use for this is also a yarn that I bought during last year's wool walk. This is Retrosaria Pomar Brusca in the colorway C, and I'm pretty sure this is an undyed colorway. If you're unfamiliar with the brand, they're a Portuguese yarn brand, and this particular yarn blend is 50% merino and 50% I looked up how to pronounce it. Salway? I'm gonna put in a voiceover if I completely butchered that. So if the voiceover is, if I pronounce that word in a different voice, that is why. But one thing I really like is that the sheep breeds that they use for this yarn are native to Portugal. I think it's really, really cool when brands try to keep things as local as possible. So I'm pretty sure they use Portuguese sheep, they spin it in Portugal, they dye it in Portugal. I would love to go and visit their store one day. I think it's in Lisbon. Definitely on the travel bucket list. I can't tell if I'm like moving my seat a lot every time I get up to switch the yarn. So if I'm like moving side to side and there's a lot of cuts, that is why. So the next sweater I want to knit is also in a similar brownish color, and it is another cardigan. It is the Pressed Flowers cardigan by Aimee Christophers, and this is another pattern from my Make 9. This is an all over colorwork pattern, but it is knit with mosaic knitting. So if you're unfamiliar with mosaic knitting, you are only knitting with one strand at a time. Pros of that, I think it's easier and more approachable than stranded knitting. Cons of that is that it takes me a little bit longer because I'm basically knitting 2 rows for every 1 row in length. But I think the finished object is worth all the effort. And if you go on the Ravelry project page for this cardigan, there are so many beautiful combinations. Like, I haven't seen one that I didn't like. I also really like that the pattern works well with if you use 2 solid colors, or if you use a solid color and a variegated or a color changing yarn. For my yarn combination, for my main color, I'm using yet another yarn that I bought during last year's wool walk. This is Moondrake Corriedale Fingering in Espresso, so it's a non-superwash yarn in this dark brown color, but in certain lighting it almost has like a green sheen to it. I am a big fan of the color, clearly, because this is a second brown cardigan in a row that I'm sharing. And then for my contrast color, I want to use this okay, I have to put some of this yarn down. For my contrast color, I'd like to use this Spin Cycle colorway in the color Pale September, which is the store exclusive colorway for La Mercerie. And I think this is one of the more subtle shades of Spin Cycle, especially the batch that I got. It is a lot of soft pinks, but then there's streaks of yellow through there. It kind of reminds me a lot of the Aimee's shawl colorway from La Bien-Aimée that I'm using for the Esther Sweater. And I was absolutely obsessed with this colorway when it first came out, and I've had it for like 1.5 years and I have yet to knit with it. So this cardigan is definitely a priority because I really want to knit up this colorway because I think it's beautiful. Also interesting, one of the reasons I was interested in this yarn and why I'd like to explore more like non-superwash fingering weight yarns and like woolly wools is there's such a wide range of gauge that can be achieved with these yarns. Like this, the yarn label says you can use anywhere from like 2.5 to 4 millimeter needles. The next sweater I'd like to knit is another all over mosaic knitting sweater pattern, also knit with Spin Cycle yarns. It is the Shifty Sweater by Andrea Mowry, and it has the same slip stitch pattern as the Night Shift shawl, which I've now knit twice. And I believe there's also a cardigan, a cowl, a hat, maybe some socks as well. Clearly people are enamored with this stitch pattern, and I am too. So this pattern is knit entirely with Spin Cycle yarns, which if you're familiar with them, they're quite a luxury. I totally understand why. They are milled in the US, dyed in the US, with the US grown wool. I think the price is completely justified, but also it's not attainable for a lot of people, including myself. Andrea Mowry herself has a list of alternatives and recommendations, I'm pretty sure, on the pattern page or on the Ravelry page. And if you go through people's projects, like there's so many alternatives for every single budget. There's wool alternatives. I've seen acrylic alternatives, like at Michael's they have a lot of color changing yarns. I think I mentioned, I don't know if I mentioned it in my Make 9 or not, but I have a ton of Spin Cycle and Stash from when I first started knitting. I was just obsessed with their colorways. I think they're so beautiful. I still really think they're beautiful, but I've slowed down on purchasing it because I just bought so much in a short period of time and I was too scared to use it because it was so expensive. I considered making this sweater all in Spin Cycle, and despite the fact that the money has already been spent, I think I would just have sticker shock if I did end up knitting this all in Spin Cycle. So I'm going to be using a tonal yarn as my background and then Spin Cycle as the contrast colors. But oh, before I get into that, I do want to do a sort of major modification on this sweater. So this sweater is knit with a circular yoke, and I think the pattern has been updated once or twice since it's been released, but I've just seen so many people on Ravelry complain about the fit of the sweater, and as is, I don't like the fit of circular yoke sweaters on myself 90% of the time. I think I've talked about how they kind of remind me of like a mushroom. They're like tight around the shoulders and then it just goes straight down. I don't think it looks flattering on my body type, as I am short with a large bust, and I feel like it doesn't look good on me. And then on top of that, all those complaints. So what I'm planning on doing is modifying it into a drop shoulder pattern. I think I'm pretty familiar with the stitch pattern at this point because like I said, I've knit that night shift shawl twice. I'm going to keep it relatively simple. Like, I don't think I'm going to do any shoulder shaping. I'm going to do a true drop shoulder sweater, kind of like if you have knit the Stripe Hype sweater by if you've knit the Stripe Hype sweater, I cannot pronounce the designer's name off the top of my head, and I sincerely apologize for that, but obviously I will put the name on the screen. So that sweater also doesn't have any shaping. You just increase for the neckline in the front, and I think I'm going to try to do something similar for this sweater because it seems the most straightforward path, and I've also never tried to construct a sweater by myself, and it seems really simple. It's basically like you're knitting a rectangle on the back and then joining and knitting a rectangle in the front. My background color, I'd like to use this Moondrake Cormo Sport in the colorway Sprout. It is a really nice, like, lettucey, mushy peas kind of green. And I think I have like one other sweater quantity of yarn in my stash in a similar shade of green, and I'm really into this shade of green, and I would love to have multiple sweaters in this shade of green. But let's start with this one. So you may be thinking, how is this hand-dyed yarn as a background any cheaper than using a Spin Cycle yarn? Because they're both around the same price point. I got this yarn on a sale from Brooklyn General, and I think I also had a coupon code on top of the sale. So basically I got this yarn for like 50% off, which is why I've been saving it for something special, and this is definitely a special project as it has been in my Ravelry favorites since my early days of knitting. So I have the Spin Cycle Dyed in the Wool, which is their sport weight yarn in 2 different colorways. First up, I have the Castle, which has like shades of yellow, green, there's a little bit of pink in there, there's some creams, and then Cassiopeia. This is the Starlight Knitting Society colorway, their store exclusive colorway, and this one has like blues, purples, also some pinks and creams. Ideally, I'm kind of leaning more towards just using the Castle as the colorway all throughout the sweater, and then using this green all throughout the sweater as a background. However, if I do that, I will have to buy more of the Spin Cycle in this colorway because I only have 2 skeins. So maybe what I'll do is I will try to get this cast on before the wool walk. That way, if I need to buy more yarn, I can buy it during the wool walk on a discount. Yes, that is the plan. I don't know, I'm really vibing with just the greens. I think they look so good together. I'm gonna look through people's project pages on Ravelry to see what people's project look like with this color and with this color, and if I think they will go together. The last sweater in my spring knitting plans also has a similar color story. Okay, I have to look up this name because it is, I think, a Finnish word or Swedish. Pohjola. I don't even know if I wrote it down, if I spelled it correctly in my notes, but it is this pattern by Sari Nordland, which she currently has a knit along going on with. It is a circular yoke fingering weight sweater, and I would like to knit this as a gift knit for my mom. Her birthday is in September, but because this is a fingering weight sweater and I am really bad with gift knitting deadlines, I make myself so stressed out right before the deadline. So I really have to give myself more time to get it done, especially like I said, because this is a fingering weight sweater. I think the color work in this sweater is so unique. It looks so intense, and I'm pretty sure I forget, I was watching somebody's podcast and they were knitting this and they said there's some pearl stitches in the yoke. So it's definitely not for the lighthearted, but because I'm giving myself so many months in advance to knit it, I think I can get it done. I also have knit my mom the Twinkle sweater by Midori Hirose as a birthday gift. It's technically supposed to be her gift for 2022. I didn't give it to her until 2023 because I had half a sleeve left for like 12 months, and I'm pretty sure, maybe not even half a sleeve, maybe I had the full sleeve left, and then I ended up knitting the second sleeve in like 2 days. It was so stupid. That was the past. Future me is more prepared and is going to get this done by September. So I dug through my stash and I found some fingering weight all non-superwash yarns. So last year I was having a little bit of a blue millwind. I really like light blue and like a specific shade of light blue, and I bought quite a lot. Not a lot. I bought a considerable amount of yarn in this light blue colorway. I think it's like end of 2022, beginning of 2023. I was like having my light blue era. I was in my light blue era. But then I knit a sweater in light blue and I really enjoyed the sweater and I like the yarn that I used in it, but I just don't wear it that much. So even though I like light blue as a color, it's not necessarily a color I enjoy wearing that much, which leaves me in a little bit of a conundrum because I have a few sweater quantities of light blue now. But we're just taking it one step at a time. I'm happy to find a sweater I can make with this light blue sweater quantity. So for my main color, I'm going to be using this Coast to Coast yarn. This is their non-superwash merino in the colorway Cornflower Bolette. And this was from their Encores pre-order last January. This is such a beautiful shade of blue. It almost has, it's like a very warm blue and it almost has like a greenish feel to it. I think on camera it looks a little bit cooler than it is. I don't know how accurate these colors are coming up. I also really love that this is named after an edible mushroom. I looked up, I was like, this is a specific name. I'm sure it's named after something. So I looked at pictures of the mushroom and the mushroom is so pretty. I purchased from Coast to Coast Yarn Co.'s pre-orders a few times last year, but this is going to be the first time I'm finally knitting it up. Finally. As for my contrast colors, so this sweater uses 2 contrast colors. And I have 3 options because I'm not sure about how much contrast I want. Like if I want it low contrast, high contrast, I'm going to have to swatch and find out. So my 3 contrast color options. First up, we have Mondim in this creamy color. This is another yarn by Retrosaria Pomar, the Portuguese yarn brand I talked about earlier. This is technically a sock yarn, but it is non-superwash and nylon free, and a lot of people use it in garments with no issues. I have actually used it as like a contrast color in a garment, so yeah, it's completely good, completely fine to use it that way, even though it is sold as a sock yarn. The 2 other possible contrast colors I have are Keats & Co. Finch, which is another non-superwash wool. This is grown spun dyed in the US, and this colorway, this one is Wasabi, and then the lighter green colorway is Leek. And honestly, all 4 colors look really good together in my opinion, but I don't think I have enough of the 2 greens to just do like the blue and the green. I have to use the white as contrast color 1 unless I buy additional skeins of these. This Leek colorway might be discontinued though. I don't remember. But yeah, this is the palette I have in mind. Or maybe I can use both of these as contrast color 1, like alternating them, and then use the white as contrast color 2. that is a possibility for sure. And those are my spring garment knitting plans. As you can see, I am trying to stretch out sweater weather season for as long as possible. I actually hate winter and much prefer the warmer months. So I'm kind of hoping in the upcoming months we have some like clear skies, mid 60s, light breeze, like those kind of days. That would be so perfect. Cherry blossom season is almost upon us. It's just the best time of the year. Oh my god. Wait, cherry blossom season? Is this not giving cherry blossoms? Do I need to cast this on now to wear to see the cherry blossoms next month? This is so cherry blossom. This is the bark. These are the cherry blossoms. Oh my god. I don't know. I saw some email this morning that like in some of the parks in the city, the cherry blossoms are already starting to bloom. Maybe I will try to get this done. That seems really unrealistic. Maybe I'll try to cast it on while it's still cherry blossom season. Wow, I got distracted. A part of me is still like, oh, maybe I should have added a tank or a tea to this list, but no. I do not need to. Plus, I'd have to buy yarn from most of those. I do have some summer yarns and stuff, but I will save those for summer. If you want to see that, I guess in the future, feel free to follow along. And if you enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up. And did I say if you have spring knitting plans, I'd love to know what they are. Do we have any of the same projects? Are we using any of the same yarns? I'd love to hear your thoughts. And I think that's all I have to say for today. Thank you so much for watching and happy knitting. Until next time, bye.